G'day folks, welcome to the next episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. I'm here today with my colleague Lauren, as I am each week. How you going?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Sound so excited about it.
Well, change is as good as a holiday, No, it's all good. We've got an episode.
I'm excited about this one.
Really? I do.
Sorry, I cut you off.
As usual, we're going off on a tangent straight away. I was about to say I had to mansplain some stuff to you before. And then it reminded me of this funny meme I saw the other day of this picture of a man going, "Ladies, mansplaining is a man explaining things to you."
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether that be on YouTube or your favourite podcast app. The reason why
I don't mansplain, by the way. I don't like that. It's a strange start to the episode. As you were.
We weren't mansplaining. You weren't mansplaining.
No.
We were sort of working through something together, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we got so. The end.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess because this is, if you've been with us for a long time, you would have remembered Ben's technical water filtration episode.
This could be like that.
And he's got another one. That's why I'm excited, because he's got another one here on gas stoves, and it's like hardcore data specs. He was like, said to me before we were coming on the stairs, he was like, "Oh, I just found this really cool video on YouTube about how the little rubber flange inside a regulator works." And I was just like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it is.
You said it does actually sound cool. You supported my. You made it patted me on the back. That's really cool, man. That's exciting, isn't it? Well done.
My dear friend. But anyway, no. It's great because obviously I'm the more emotional, feely side of our duo, and you're the more data, technical, safety Ben sort of side of things, which is great. And that's why I love these episodes, because the reason why we had that discussion downstairs, right, was because you've used terminology here, which in my mind, in my sort of day-to-day interaction with customers and how we talk about stoves with customers, it sort of didn't make sense to me. It was like a bit confusing because, like you've talked about low pressure and high pressure. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, low output, high output. No, pressure, output, totally different things. If we're talking about a high pressure stove, or most of the stoves we have that we would consider high pressure are still regulated. So in that case, they're all low pressure. So it was just that sort of trying to get clear before the episode on exactly what you're going to be talking about, so I can contribute in some meaningful way.
Well, I got all geeky yesterday because the whole gas thing, I know when I first started in the outdoor industry, understanding gas fittings, types of gas bottles, high output stoves, low output stoves, regulators, all of that stuff is quite confusing. And I read an article quite a while ago where I went down that research path and put my knowledge onto an article on the blog, which you can find on our blog. It's called Understanding Gas for Camping and Caravan Appliances. And we did an episode back, I've made a note here, in episode 83, where we talked about the new LCC27 fittings for gas bottles, which we're not going to go into all that detail today. That's a slightly different topic. Today, this started off with me thinking, how do we help people decide to pick a camp stove? Because there's a heap of camp stoves. It's high pressure, low pressure, BTUs, all of these sort of things. And then there's gas types, gas bottles. Do I need a regulator? All those sort of things. And it can get pretty confusing. So I thought we'd cover off on a little bit on, so what we're going to cover off on is the difference between high pressure and low pressure stoves. Mm-hmm. Differences in gas, what gas you can use with what stove and why.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of outline how you might go about choosing a stove, and hopefully that sets you on a good path to sort of go, I understand what I'm looking at. When I look at this whole range of stoves now, I can pin it down to 4 or 5 different models before I actually make a decision.
Yeah.
So this was actually based on a question from a long-time listener, and I think possibly through YouTube, a long-time listener, but Tugboat is his name. He said, butane versus propane versus LP gas, portability, size, runtime, refillable, throwaway, pros and cons and all that. And that's where this started. So it was going to be one of our customer question episodes, and I thought, this is a bigger episode to talk about.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
So we might send you we usually send those customer question people a stubby call-up. We might send Tugboat one anyway, because he's been around for ages. I feel
like he has been around for a really long time.
YouTube, and I think he goes on a different name on YouTube.
Is a he?
I think I know his actual name.
Oh yeah.
But I don't want to say now because I may
You don't
it
want
may
to
not be the
assume
right
your
connection.
gender, Tugboat.
I think he signed off on this with a male name.
Right.
And I can't remember how I made the connection to Tugboat or other way around.
Probably because of his YouTube handle and the little logo that he uses, that white one with the little the black and white logo.
Probably. Anyway, hope we've got the right person. But either way, Tugboat's getting
He'll comment.
We're going to send someone a stubby collar and a sticker. So I started down this research path and I've got a heap of notes here. So bear with me.
I'm excited. Let's get into it.
I think this will probably also stir up a heap of other questions because a lot of this is no black and white sort of answer sometimes when you look at it and you think, well, you say that, but then these specs don't quite line up with that. And I think then you go down the path of engineering and maybe where things are tested and all of that and you get variances. But this is a high level guide. So
because it's like you can't just to sort of summarize that, BTUs is a perfect example, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like there's no simple way of converting, say, grams per hour to BTUs or whatever, and something that consumes more fuel per hour might have a lower BTU than something that consumes less fuel per hour, but it seems to burn hotter. And then,
and we touch on that a bit here too, because BTU is a measure of energy, not volume or amount of gas. So propane and butane, one burns hotter, so you get more energy per the same amount of weight. So lots of variances like that. So don't try and line everything up exactly. Use this as a guide on which path to go down. And if you've got other questions, please come to us and let us know. Or if I've gone completely left field in my research or have understood things completely incorrectly for the period that I've been in this industry, then please call me out on it. But this is what I've found out. So for starters, lgas.com.au is a great resource for all of this. I wouldn't say it's a user-friendly written site. It looks like it's just a heap of information dumped on there by the people who really know what they're talking about.
The gas geeks.
The gas geeks, yep. But it is a really good site for all of this information. So if you're wondering, you want to do some more research, jump on there and have a look. That's lgas.com.au. They
also have a gas refill map, don't they, for Australia?
I reckon they do, yeah. Yep. So we'll start off in high pressure versus low pressure stoves. So if we just keep it to talking about 2-burner camp stoves here, we're not talking about all the variances, single burner, walk burner, all of those sort of things, just a 2-burner camp stove. You get high pressure and low pressure stoves. Now, a low pressure stove has a regulator between the gas bottle and the stove. Some of them are on the gas bottle, the little flying disc thing that you see.
The little UFO, inline UFO.
That's right, yeah. We'll put some links to some cool videos and stuff that I found in the comments, or Larry might even cut it into the video so you don't have to click anywhere else. And some of them, like Coleman, have a little regulator on an arm that you attach to the stove, and Companion have a little regulator that's kind of on the hose.
In their high output hose, it's just like a little gum nut thing on the end, right?
Yeah, which I think is at the gas bottle end as well.
And that's why it's confusing, because that's the Coleman 2-burner high output stove with a regulator.
Yeah. But
it's not high pressure.
The output's talking about output of the heat, input's talking about, or pressure's talking about the input of the gas into the stove.
Right.
And this is why it's always important to use the regulator that came with your stove, with the stove. Don't change them out, because those regulators have different pressures that they adjust to. So the general little flying disc ones will adjust to 2.75 kPa or 2.8 kPa, which is the standard for most barbecues and that sort of thing. When you see those little flying disc things, it's taking the pressure from the bottle down to 2.75 kPa.
Just on that though, I'm probably jumping ahead here. The UFO regulators that are 2.75, isn't it 2.75? Mm-hmm. You can swap those ones out because they're a standard universal regulator for a range of different burners.
If you're swapping like for like.
That's right.
Yep.
So for example, a caravan bayonet system uses that 2.75. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a stove that also has that, then you can use that with your caravan system. But if it has a different regulator, you can't use it.
Yeah, and I think I didn't write down, we've covered off on that on an episode too, but if you then have a regulated stove that you're attaching to a regulated caravan system, you then need to remove the regulator, but there's other rules attached to that as well. You also need a flame cutout device and those sort of things to be legal there.
But you can't swap out a Coleman regulator and connect it to your caravan, because even though they're both regulated, it's a totally different regulation supply, like pressure.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to find much information on just what those, the little flying disc ones clearly say that the input range that it will take gas pressure and the output range that it adjusts it to. The common ones and the companion ones, much harder to find that information. So I don't know what the actual output is at the end of that, at the other side of that.
Yeah, because I think the UFO ones aren't specific to the brands, right? They're like a I'm pretty sure they're a standard.
I think
I just said that before.
There's adjustable ones as well, though. I haven't gone down that path in this respect, but for the most part, if you bought a gas stove or a barbecue with a little UFO looking regulator, it's going to take the gas bottle pressure down to 2.75 kPa for the stove to operate. Now that little regulator is really cool. It's actually got a diaphragm inside, and it takes gas in one side, and it's got a spring on top that's kind of adjusted to a certain pressure. So we'll put this diagram up, but as the gas comes in, it requires so much pressure in order for that spring to compress, and it lets gas in at a slow rate.
Cool.
And the adjustable ones, you then sort of screw that spring up and down a bit to allow more or less pressure.
Yeah.
And then it pushes that diaphragm up, and then the gas comes out the other side at that certain pressure. So it's not coming in at the full pressure from the gas bottle. And it also has a little pressure release valve in there as well, that if it gets too much, it then just spurts straight out of the regulator. So most gas bottles have a pressure release valve in it already, plus the regulator's got a pressure release valve in it. So all safety measures.
Nice.
And what that does is maintain a steady gas output. So a gas cylinder we'll go into shortly has about 800 to 900 kPa of pressure inside the gas bottle. So these little guys are taking 800 to 900 kPa down to 2.75 kPa. So you've always got that pressure in the bottle. Now, when you talk about cold weather, gas pressure in the gas bottle drops down. It's going to have to go, well, I don't think it would ever get down to less than 2.75 kPa in the bottle, but you've always got that pressure that the gas stove needs at 2.75 kPa. So where a high pressure stove that we'll get into shortly is affected by the pressure in the bottle based on the external temperature, a low pressure stove isn't impacted because all it needs is 2.75 kPa on the outside, on the non-gas bottle side of the regulator in order for it to work properly. So it's much better in cold weather. You also get more consistent heat and better heat control. You tend to use less gas because it's not just barreling straight out of the bottle. It's a controlled amount coming out of the bottle. Performs better in the cold. And as I mentioned, 2.75 kPa required in Australia. Now, a high pressure stove, on the other hand, does not have a regulator. It's just a hose that screws straight onto the gas bottle, straight into the stove, and that burner then has 800 to 900 kPa, or probably less because it goes through a little jet. I'm not exactly sure how the science of that works, but the gas then comes straight to that burner, comes straight out, mixes with oxygen and air, obviously, and then turns into a flame. That's the gas bottle, the stoves that you tend to hear going like roaring really loudly because it's just gas coming straight out. So more of a on-off type scenario. It's either full heat or off. It doesn't really have an in-between. You don't have as much control over that gas or for simmering. It is, as I mentioned before, affected by external temperatures. So if you get a really cold night, we'll talk about boil points of gas shortly, but as the temperature goes down, the pressure in the bottle goes down. That obviously immediately impacts the pressure at the burner. So if it's designed to run at 800 to 900 kPa, and it's really cold and it drops below that, you're getting lesser flame coming out of the burner. Similar
to your butane type stoves, but we'll talk more about those later too.
Yeah. And I've already said it, but as I've noted here, 800 to 900 kPa.
I'm going to ask you a question which you might not know the answer to.
Oh, no. Put me on the spot.
Those 428 gram propane cylinders, the single-use small ones, are they still the same 800 to 900 kPa as an LPG?
Probably. I don't know for sure because they probably are, simply because of the nature of the gas and the pressure that's required in order for it to condense to a liquid. And that's why it's a heavier construction as well.
LPG cylinders for gas bottles, they're called LPG, but those little disposable single-use ones are called propane. They're not called LPG, so they're not liquid.
You haven't read the notes, have you?
No, because I just came in here. I wanted to be an enthusiastic participant
I did all these and I said,
episode.
Here's the notes. I gave it to you this morning. I've sorted this episode out. and I've answered all of this. If you could just sit there and be quiet and listen, you'll learn some things. It's been mansplaining.
Sorry. No, I just was like, I was like, don't read the notes because Ben's obviously put a lot of effort into this and it'll be a much better episode if you're not just sitting there going ho-hum, but you're all like actually listening to what he's saying
active.
And responding. I'm being an active listener.
So can you just sit there and go, That's all I'm asking.
But my question is in this note here, right? You've written LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. Can be a mix of propane and butane, but is propane in most cases in Australia. That doesn't answer whether or not LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, is that exactly the same as propane?
So moving on to the next part of the episode, I'll explain that. Getting onto gas types, now that we've had a brief intermission of confusion and laughter, there is different gas types and they pretty much all come under the umbrella of LPG.
Okay.
LPG can be a mix of generally propane and butane. In Australia, the LPG that you fill your gas bottle or if you've got gas bottles at home, that is 100% propane in Australia.
Okay.
In New Zealand, there's a percentage of butane in it. If you get into auto gas, it's a different mix again.
Right.
This is totally different to natural gas. So LPG covers these gas types, propane, which is better in cold. It's got boil point's a really important thing here. Propane boils at minus 42 degrees Celsius. So at minus 42 degrees, that gas is still boiling that liquid is still boiling to create gas. So you'd have to be in extremely cold temperatures before you get no gas out of the bottle. At room temperature, there's 860 kPa in the bottle and it's a more volatile gas than butane. So there's more pressure in the bottle. So it can handle those lower temperatures because of that extra pressure in the lower boil point, but it does need a heavy canister for storage, which is why you've got those big heavy 9 or 4 kilo canisters and those little bomb canisters, the 458 or whatever they are, gram ones, are of a heavier duty construction than the little hiking ones that you see. They need that heavier construction because of the pressure in the bottle. Then there's butane. There's N-Butane and Isobutane. Butane's cheaper, not as good in the cold and this is important, it boils at minus 0.4 degrees. So you know those little canister things that you get?
Hairspray cylinders.
Yeah, like that. And you put the canister in there and you flick it on. People use them in cold temperature and go, it doesn't work. It's because if you're down to close to 0 degrees, that gas isn't boiling. So it's not, the liquid's not boiling. So it's not creating gas. That's why the stove's not working.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Super cold, like 6 o'clock on a really frosty morning in winter by the river.
Yeah.
Snap cold, you're wearing gloves, you just want a hot coffee, you can't get it.
That's right. Yeah. So no good in cold weather. Room temperature pressure. So remember we said it was 860 kPa for propane, but butane's 215 kPa. So we're talking quarter of the pressure in the bottle. So it's more stable than propane and you can store it in those lightweight canisters, hence the hairspray canister. So it's more portable. You can have it in those little flexible lightweight canisters so it's not as dangerous in terms of pressure.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It potentially burns a little hotter and this is scientific, maybe releases more energy per the same amount of gas burnt than propane.
Okay.
So when it is burning efficiently, you might get a little more out of butane, but you probably, unless you're doing a really specific test, you're not going to notice it. Now there's isobutane, which, and I'm going to use a technical word here, is an isomer of butane. Do you know what isomer is?
I feel like in my mind, the only reference that I have to that is The Simpsons.
Okay. I don't know what The Simpsons.
Yeah. Like isotopes and nuclear power plants and Homer Simpson.
It's not nuclear stoves. No, I don't really understand it. I just wrote some notes here to make myself sound intelligent. You're
doing really well so far.
It's the same chemical formula as butane, but it's got a different structure. So from what I understood is like butane, if you look at the molecules, they're in a straight line. Ibutane's got the same molecules, they're just put together in a different format, like a branched format.
And that makes it have a lower boiling point, right?
So yeah.
Because they're using hiking.
So it's got a minus 12 degree boil point. So it's a modified version of butane that sits at a lower.
So what does ISO mean?
It's the other, well, this is called Isobutane. So ISO just is nicer to say than Isobutane.
No, but I'm just wondering
Don't
what ISO. Do you mind if I Google? Because I want to know what ISO means.
Anyway, room temperature pressure of 310 kPa. So slightly higher than butane, but much lower than propane. So that then allows it to be used in those lightweight canisters. Hence why in those little 230 or 450 gram hiking canisters, there's isobutane propane.
Yeah.
So there is a percentage of propane in there, but you're talking 20 to 30% propane, 70 to 80% butane, so that it can be stored in those lightweight canisters.
And so when we were doing our episode with Jet Boyle, he was talking about in America, like in Australia, you can have a maximum 70% propane in any of those.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in America, they don't have that same thing. Obviously, that's because propane is much more volatile.
Yep.
And it's in those tiny little canisters that are relatively thin walled.
Yep. So it would be a safety thing.
So it's more of a safety thing for us. I'm just wanted to say quickly, in chemistry, isomers, which is what ISO is chiefly.
Well, there you go. Isomer, ibutane, isobutane. The answer's right here in the notes.
It's right here, but it says here that isomer is chiefly of hydrocarbons. However, it is – oh, hang on, I lost it. Stay with us, folks.
I didn't get quite to the chemical makeup of all of these things. I think I did mention that in the article that I wrote.
Each of two or more compounds with the same formula but a different arrangement of atoms in the molecule and different properties. So literally butane but rearranged. That's what iso just means rearranged.
Also literally what I just said.
Yes, I know, but it was more so, you know how you've got like isotopes, and I was like, well, what does the iso mean? It's rearranged topes. So if you ever see anything that has got iso in the front of it, you know that means rearranged. Ultimate, like in a dummy's guide to chemistry, iso equals rearranged.
Rearranged butane. Okay. Isobutane sounds better. Anyway, if you're still with us, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that. So
we have different brains. We're interested in different things.
So LPG, as I mentioned before, covers all of those things. A mix of propane and butane within a canister all comes under the LPG label.
Right.
Generally, you can't connect the wrong gas to the wrong stove because the fittings just won't work. If you're going to fill a gas stove, it's going to be propane because the fittings are all functional with a propane refill station. You can't refill small gas canisters with propane because you can't get fittings that allow that to happen. The Gas Association Australia is quite strict on a lot of those things. I don't think they'd allow.
In theory, though, if you were to jump onto AliExpress or eBay or whatever and buy yourself an adapter, your stove still wouldn't run because they have different densities and stuff, right? So you can't run a stove that's a propane stove. You can't get an adapter that will make that run off those hairdressing canisters and have it work because the jets and stuff, the density is different.
Possibly.
Isn't it also the rate of pressure over I think I was reading something somewhere once that because your LPG cylinders have a much higher pressure, that's why you can connect them to barbecue hoses and things like that. Whereas butane, which comes in those hairdressing canisters, you can't, or hairspray canisters, you can't have that connected to a hose or over a distance because the rate of delivery drops. Just like voltage drop when your battery is trying to push power over a cable that's really long, you won't get the same voltage on the other end. Same with gas, right? And gas pressures.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine I don't know why there'd be any point in trying to do that because whatever stove you've got is designed for the gas it's designed for. So it doesn't make sense to try and run it off a different gas.
Yeah, agreed.
You're probably trying to save money because butane is potentially a bit cheaper, but
maybe
you might end up using more gas or I don't know, I wouldn't just use the gas bottle that it's designed for. So just want to clarify weather performance. The gas, and this is something that kind of maybe it's just my brain, but confused me with boil points and stuff. And how does that work? That it's at the boil point that liquid within the cylinder turns into a gas. So at
like evaporate or whatever.
Yep. So at minus 42 degrees, if you put a cup of propane here in liquid form, which you wouldn't be able to do, but if you could release it immediately at minus 42 degrees or below, it would technically stay as a liquid.
Okay.
If you heated the room up to 43, it would then turn into a vapor.
Okay.
Butane will sit there as a liquid until it gets to minus 0.4 or minus 2 degrees I've seen in some instances as well. So it needs to turn into a vapor in order for it to be able to use in a gas stove. Otherwise, it's just liquid. There's no pressure.
Science is pretty cool.
It is cool. About it. My wife would be proud of me. What did I say here? Oh, and it also stored under pressure, which we'll get onto. All right, so I did note it here. So when I say pressure, so that condenses to a liquid at a pressure between 100 and 200 psi. Now, I have grabbed this information just from L-gas and those sort of places, so I might not be exactly right, which is between 700 and 1300 kPa. Hence the need for those bottles, like the propane bottles, to be so thick because it's going to need a whole lot of pressure in order to turn to liquid.
Is if it's like if it's -15 and the butane's still liquid, and then it goes up to -12 and -10, and it's technically it's passing the boiling point. Technically, it still won't. It still won't. It still won't.
If it's under
become
pressure,
a vapor.
If it's under pressure,
unless it's under pressure.
No. So this
or
is
vice
where it gets
versa.
confusing.
It won't become a liquid
so
unless
if it
it's
goes,
under pressure.
if it goes, I mean, that gas cylinder can be 50 degrees in the car, which is like 100 and something degrees above its boil point, but because it's stored under pressure, it's still a liquid.
Oh, that makes sense. Right. I'm with you now. I'm with you.
Yeah. This is it, like in the cylinder.
Yeah, in the cylinder. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it will stay a liquid either under pressure or below a certain temperature.
Okay.
So that's kind of a good way to understand what happens when you go, well, why is my stove not working in the cold if it's a butane stove?
So then I'm assuming as soon as you open the cylinder and the pressure drops, that's when it turns into a gas.
Well, yeah, it escapes out into the atmosphere where there's no pressure and it's a gas.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing that at -40
that makes sense.
degrees, and then it probably just sits there in the bottle.
Doesn't do anything. Yeah.
Although if it was under pressure, it would probably just come out as a liquid, I suppose. I don't know how that would work.
That is true because, you're right, because it's under pressure.
Yeah.
Like a fountain.
So cylinder types, we'll get onto stoves eventually. I thought understanding all of this is a really good way to sort of work out which gas bottle works for you, and then possibly just go for a liquid stove in the end if you don't like gas. There's if we talk about the little gas cylinder, the 230 and 450 and 100 grams that used with jet boil and MSR stoves and those sort of things.
Like little dome-shaped ones.
Yep, they're lightweight construction with isobutane propane inside. So 70-30, 80-20 mix. They've got a little Lindel valve, self-sealing Lindel valve inside. So you can take the stove off, it seals up inside. They're relatively safe to transport because you don't need as much pressure, being mostly butane. They're disposable, lightweight, and as I mentioned, it's isobutane and propane inside of there. Then you've got the slightly larger ones, and those are available, as I mentioned, 100, 230 grams and 450 grams, and there's some variants like camping gas have got a different
or whatever.
one. And now there's BOM, or the sometimes known as UNF or Coleman or CGA 600. BOM stands for, and I looked this up, I could only find one spot that said it, but bulk output male, which I thought was a strange name, but
male is in male, female.
Yeah. I guess it's got an external thread, but it does fit inside like a male fitting wood. Bulk output, I'm not sure why it's bulk output, but that's all I could find on that naming anyway. But for compact camping and portable appliances like gas stoves and showers and that sort of thing quite often take these cylinders.
And heaters.
Yep. They're disposable, but they're much heavier construction because they contain propane. They're 100% propane, so like you would put in in a 9 kilo bottle. So that's why they're that heavier duty construction. A lot of people look at that and think, well, I've got 450 gram Lindel type cylinder and a 450 Coleman one. Why is this one in this massive heavy sort of container that I wouldn't take hiking? It's because
Different
it's propane
gas.
and not butane. And that's why you can use those little ones you can get adapters to use it for like a camping stove and that sort of thing because it's propane, not butane in those cylinders.
So,
or vice versa.
The thing that I don't like about them though, right, is that they are single use.
They are, but if you go to the US, they fill them up over there. I'm not saying fill it up here. In here,
we're not recommending that because that's against the law.
I'm pretty sure there's adapters that you can buy, but
which is against the law.
Don't do it. It's not, as the Australian Gas Association puts all sorts of stuff in place to be safe with gas. I think we're probably
safety is really important. We need to keep ourselves safe realistically.
We're always relaxed with gas until something happens and then we realise why the AGA has put these things in place. So just be really mindful if you're going to buy these things from overseas and use them.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea. I wouldn't be playing with stupid things with my gas with my family around. Explosions and fires that can destroy not just camping gear but lives. And then, so that's the BOM construction. That's the compact ones. But then you've got your 3/8 BSP and POL, larger cylinders. So 4 kilos up to 9 kilo cylinders. And they've got two different types of 3/8 BSP is British. I forget what that is.
British standard something or other, I reckon. British.
It slips my mind. Anyway, they stick straight up out of the bottle. It's a smaller left-handed thread that you screw it on. And then the POL is now not
The
POL,
LCC
it's now
27.
LCC 27, which are the ones that go in the side. They have the same gas.
Cylinders, same gas, same everything. It's just
valve.
the connection on the top.
Just the valve on top, yep. That's what you'll find for most caravans, a lot of barbecues, your Weber barbecue, all of those sort of things. They'll use all of these cylinders. And
Swap and goes.
Yep. Most camping stoves, even if they use the BOM things, you can get adapters to use on these larger cylinders.
What I've actually found though, and it's probably something to bear in mind when you're choosing your stove, is that I would say 90% of camping stoves will have a 3/8 BSP hose.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the 3/8 BSP canisters tend to be like 1.25 through to 4 kilo in size. There's a couple of different size ranges in there, a lot smaller, a lot more compact, even though they're your standard LPG cylinder, right?
Yep.
Whereas your POL are the 4.5 and the 9 kilo swap and goes, or your LCC 27. Is the 4.5 and 9 kilo. Majority of camping stoves will have the 3/8 BSP connection. I've found the ones that are that are regulated with a UFO regulator hose, they all tend to be the LCC 27 connection.
Yep, they do.
Whereas everything else isn't.
Yeah, and that's probably why the likes of Companion have their own little regulator on it, because it's made to fit that LCC 3/8 BSP fitting. So they've got a 3/8 BSP fitting on the regulator.
Yeah.
So I've got we did talk about the LCC 27 fittings in episode 83. If you want to go back and find out what all those updates are, there's a little confusion around old POL fittings and new LCC 27 fittings and which ones fit what. We explained it all in that episode, and there's an article on our website too that explains it all. Now, the last one are butane canisters, which are the hairspray ones. They're just butane, classic for use in those little lunchbox style canisters.
Yeah, what's it called? It's got a bayonet, like you push and twist.
Yeah, you don't even twist it. You just, some of them you put in and then you just have a lever that you pull and it just pushes it, and it's just got a little push thing on the top.
Yeah.
So similar to, aerosol cans, regular aerosol cans. They're lightweight and cheap, which is why they're in those little, $20.
It's $5 for like 6.
Yeah. Yep. So really good for picnics and that sort of thing. I did read yesterday a bunch of things where they said are suitable for use inside, but we don't recommend using gas stoves inside at all.
Nah.
And there was an instance some time ago with these little canister stoves exploding, but they put safety measures in place to stop that now. But they're really cheap, good for use in probably more of a protected space where you're not subject to the really cold environments. I have seen heaters that run off these.
To wind and things as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there is a Gasmate do one.
Which seems a bit silly because those canisters don't work very well in the cold weather. So I've never actually used one of those.
Maybe the heater keeps the canister warm once it gets going.
I don't know if I'd rely on put heat on the canister. Anyway.
Who knows?
So that's all the technical stuff that I geeked out on. All right. So that was most of my day. And then I got on to the point of this episode, which is helping people choose a stove, which is the short bit at the end, because hopefully this has given you a bit of a guide on trying to decipher all the confusing things around the stove. So at least when you're looking through the range, you can sort of go, oh, I understand high pressure. I understand low pressure. I understand the type of gas bottle that I'm going to have to think about how to transport and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
So choosing a stove, I've sort of broken this down on what's the cheapest, what's most commonly purchased stove, what's the most versatile, and what you would use for lightweight. So the cheapest are, as we were just talking about, those little lunchbox style stoves.
Yeah.
You buy a 4-pack of those canisters. They probably get about an hour's burn time from each. They're $5 for those canisters. They're really good for occasional use. So if you only very occasionally go camping and you're not out in really cold environments, they'll do the job. Easy to transport, cheap to run. You don't have to worry about all the extra fittings and things.
And you can get them in a double burner size as well.
You can get them in double burner. Yep. So they're really affordable. Like you can get an entire setup for like under $30, possibly even under 10 in some instances, depending on which ones you can pick up. So you can get a really simple stove, and in warm weather, they'll do the job. They're not going to boil things quickly. It'll do the job. The most common would be high pressure LPG stoves. And I've said most common probably because they're the next most affordable, because you're talking probably $70 to $100 for a 2-burner stove for a high pressure gas stove. So I don't know if common's quite the right word to use there, because there's more of a move to a low pressure stove for that versatility with cooking. But if you're setting up a camp kit and you want something more than just the little lunchbox stove, but you don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds, then you can get a high output stove that'll boil water. You're probably going to be limited in how, like your heat control. If you're trying to simmer and that sort of thing, you're going to have a really fine point at which it's on and off.
We don't have a huge amount of those in our range though.
Not heaps, less than there used to be.
Yeah.
So,
which potentially comes back around full circle to the safety conversation.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I think though, if you're trying to set up camp on a budget and you go, oh, I can get this stove for $50 or $60, it's probably a high output stove.
Yeah.
And you're going to be limited in how you can cook on that, which is fine. If all you want to do is boil water, it's going to do the job. I had a high output stove for many, many years till I finally, I moved to a liquid stove. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
But they'll do the job. They're quite affordable. The most versatile and probably equally the most common is a low pressure stove. So we've got the likes of like Coleman's Hyperflame stove. Companion have got their high output stove, which has been part of the range for many, many years. Coleman also have a Cascade one. Dometic do some really cool ones at Kadak. Much more versatile cooking. So you've got better heat control, better gas usage, more scope in the temperature that you can use it in. So if you want more gourmet sort of cooking, then look for a high output stove, but you're going to pay a little bit more for that. But if you're going to use it all the time, you probably appreciate it, save buying it twice. And then when you go to hiking, compact versions, which work off those little Lindell stoves, so the likes of Jetboil, MSR, other brands slip my mind. There used to be 360 degrees, but they've stopped using that. Coleman do a few little compact ones.
Not Peak one. What's it called?
There's Peak one and there's another one as well. I can't remember which ones are currently in the range, but just the little ones that screw on top. Some of them sit off to the side. MSR have got a few different types, like the Pocket Rocket's a classic institutional stove.
Yep.
That's what you've got to choose from. Now we've got, if you're trying to pick one out of all of that, there's a lot on our site. Have a look at, you can filter by what's popular on our site. You can read reviews, check out what people do with it. Try and work out just what you want your stove to do. If you need something just to boil water, then you don't need to spend the earth. Get yourself a simple stove to boil water.
Yeah.
If you want to fry eggs and sausages and
do more cooking from scratch and
simmer sauces and all of
that,
that, spend a bit more and get a high output stove.
Yeah.
If you really just like, you're going for a camping trip with a friend and you've never been before and you've got to bring a stove.
Lunchbox stove
get
all the way.
Lunchbox stove, as long as it's not the middle of winter.
Yeah.
That'll do the job. I don't know if we had issues with the lunchbox stoves shipping them because they come in lightweight contains and they broke
crack
all the time.
Yeah, I think that's improved.
Sometimes we stopped shipping them for a while. I don't know if that's still the case. Then, as I mentioned, once you sort of understood the range, choose on the other features and inclusions. Some of the stoves have like a grill underneath. They don't work that well, but if you really want a grill and you're happy to wait a long time and use a fair bit of gas to melt the cheese on top of your lasagna, then use the grill, but don't expect it to heat up a whole lasagna. Some of them have little fold-down toasters on the side, so you can just put your bread over the top of the flame. Handles, piezo igniters. Some of them have auto igniters. Some of the cheaper ones, you have to bring a match,
like a lighter or a stove,
something to
stove
light
lighter.
Pick what's most important to you there. The better ones will have a rotary igniter, so you just turn the knob, and as you turn it, it clicks and it lights all in one action. So you don't have to turn it on and then click, and wait for it to light, hoping there isn't too much gas coming out.
Yeah, the poof.
The poof, yeah, that's right. That was from my Jetboil episode, isn't it? And probably one of the more important things with choosing it is the size. If you've got particular pots that you want to use on it, fry pan or something.
2-burner where they'll sit next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little compact high pressure stoves probably don't have a heap of space. So if you're going to use a big wok on it, it's not going to work. You're going to need to get something that,
or even a cast iron fry pan, you'll probably struggle.
Yeah. So just have a think about what pots you can fit side by side. So you can, if you're cooking pasta, you can boil your pasta and cook your sauce at the same time, and they're both over the top of the actual flame rather than ones that are sitting on the side.
Yeah.
Or they're both off to the side. It's not actually central to the pan.
Yeah.
I was going to get onto accessories, but that's all I come up with really quickly on what to think about when you're actually choosing a stove. I'd probably actually say don't overthink it too much with the stove. Go by what other people have used and recommended.
The only other sort of thing to bear in mind is if you've got a dedicated space to put your stove, if maybe you've got a camp kitchen that has a built-in wind guard or something, or you're trying to fit it in a slot in your van, any of that. Some of the stoves that have a fixed regulator arm, just bear in mind that you can't bypass that regulator arm. You can't swap it out. So you will have this long rigid arm that adds roughly around about 17 centimeters of length from memory. So yeah, 17, 20 centimeters of length or so.
Centimeters of width. Yeah.
Yep. So just bear that in mind.
Yep. Some of the stoves that have come out recently, I think, are really cool. Are the likes of the Kadak. It's got a funny name, Kadak Cook 2 Pro 3 or something stove. I always forget which way around that is. And also Coleman's Cascade.
3-in-1.
Cascade 3-in-1.
With the really inbuilt little hot plates.
Yeah, because they've got the Domenic stove in particular has got 2 trivets, so you can put pots on it. You can take one of those trivets out and put a griddle on there, or a fry pan, or put a fry pan and the griddle together. And then it also has a little pot support for a coffee pot. So you can put that on the griddle so your coffee pot can sit on there and not fall over as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you that option of when we talk about what pots are you going to fit on there, think about if you're going to buy a fry pan and stuff as well, that's an extra cost. So if you're going to spend $150 on a stove and then buy a saucepan and a fry pan and it's going to be $200 total, then have a look at one stove that's got these things included, because it might all come as one, and it all packs away neatly together as one as well.
And whether or not you need a fry pan if you've got a hot plate.
Yeah.
Because, obviously fry pan with an edge might be if you're doing some frying but you built like high volume, like risottos or, pilafs or whatever. Whereas if you're just frying bacon or eggs or like sausages or whatever, a hot plate's more than enough.
Yep. And the last few things I noted was just accessories. Most stoves come with some form of windshield. There are some basic ones that don't. I think of Coleman's Peak 1. Is it Peak 1? They've got it. It's a really cool looking stove.
Yeah, it is. That's why I thought, because we were talking about their hiking stove and I was like, is it Peak 1? But I'm pretty sure they're black.
Yeah, it's also called Peak. I think it's Peak 1 as well. They've got a hiking stove and a camping stove that's quite similar. And then if you want to use a wok, there's companion to a wok cooker, so you can fit a big wok on there.
And the flame is a lot broader.
Yep, but it doesn't have a windshield.
Nope.
So you might want to look at adding a windshield if that's the path you're going down, and also a stand, obviously. What are you going to put your stove on? Some tables are fine if they're reasonably heat-proof or they're metal. Wooden or plastic are probably all right, but you'd need to just be careful about any heat that's going back down, particularly if you're using hot large pots and it damaging the table. So if you've got a table with a stove on it, might be better just to get a basic stand to put it on.
Yeah.
It also has that hot element away from the table where the kids and stuff might be sitting, so you haven't got boiling water sitting next to where the kids are playing with their toys. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I got to. I hope we didn't get too techie and boring on all the details. We didn't just want to turn it into this is what stove to buy sort of episode, but here's all the information that probably confuses you when you look at a stove. If you want to go down that path, if you don't want to get this techie, then just have a look at what's popular on our website, what gets the best reviews, and buy that one because heaps of other people have been happy with it.
Yeah.
And you probably will be too.
That is true. That's a good one.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Tugboat, for the topic.
Yes.
That was a good one. We'll see you on YouTube again, I'm sure. Well, we'll see your comments on YouTube. Facebook, wherever we've seen you. I don't know. I know your name floats around.
Tell us what your real name is.
Tell us, and for everyone else, tell us what your favourite stove is and any recommendations. And if you think we've gone AWOL on anything we've said in this episode and my research is poorly fact-checked.
I think you've done well.
Then
good job.
Please let me know.
Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.
See you next time.